It's Monday, November 23rd. I'm Nick Black, and this is Walking into Work Like. Last night, the Kansas City Chiefs defeated the Las Vegas Raiders 35-31 in a fashion that was pretty much the polar opposite of the Week 5 game, Las Vegas Raiders at Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, in almost every regard. It was a late game comeback, a really late game comeback on the part of Kansas City, where they came from behind 28-31, scored a touchdown with 28 seconds left, and on the Raiders is attempted. I don't know. I mean, this isn't a knock on Carr because this is probably the best season of his career, and I actually think he's really good. But has he ever had a Hail Mary in his career? Like I've seen every game of his NFL career, right? I mean, obviously I'm a Raider fan. I don't know that he's ever. I mean, you see, like, Aaron Rodgers is like the king of Hail Marys, right? And a lot of people like to compare Carr to Aaron Rodgers. James Jones always says, "Oh, it's Baby A-Rod." But how cool would a Hail Mary have been last night? Instead, Kansas City Chiefs sealed their victory with an interception with less than 30 seconds left. And now, I'm not saying I'm okay with the loss, right? I'm really not, because I hate. First of all, I love the Raiders. Second of all, I hate the Chiefs. And my hatred of the Kansas City Chiefs is almost equal to my love for the Raiders. But what I'm saying is this loss doesn't really sting as much as it probably should, right? And I couldn't stop thinking about that last night. I mean, yeah, losing sucks. It really does. But after so many years of watching them lose over and over and over again, in large part to them in recent years, for this generation anyway, being such a bad team, it's a little bit different when you watch them compete the way that they have been, and then you watch them lose to a team that actually only has one loss on the season, the defending Super Bowl champs. I mean, fuck them. I'm not trying to praise them in any way, shape, or form, but facts are what they are. They won the Super Bowl last year. They have lost one game this year, and that was to the Raiders. They say there's no such thing as a moral victory. I've always thought that was bullshit. There are such things as moral victories. And, I mean, there's obviously things to clear up here. Raiders had several potential big plays that could have had a major impact on the game. Passes that were dropped, that were in receivers' hands, either went through or receivers couldn't hold on to them. A lot of people ragging on Nelson Aguilar. And yeah, had he made that catch, things might have been different. Maybe Raiders get, a little bit more time on their final possession than 28 seconds. And maybe Derek Carr doesn't have to force what turned out to be game-winning interception or game-stealing interception for the Chiefs. But we're talking Nelson Aguilar, 6 catches, 9 targets for 88 yards and a touchdown. Now, Darren Waller also had 88 yards and a touchdown, but he was a perfect 7 for 7. So I'm not going to hate on Nelson Aguilar. I mean, shit happens, right? If you do more good than bad, you get a pass in my book. And Nelson Aguilar, I mean, I don't know statistically if this is the best season of his career, because I don't really want to go looking through his Philly stats, but tell me, football fans, has Nelson Aguilar ever looked this good in the NFL? I don't think he has. So, I'm not hating on Nelson Aguilar. Yeah, there's some things to improve on, obviously, but he gets the pass in my book. Alec Ingold had a big Well, potentially big play where, same thing, kind of, it was in his hands and he couldn't secure the catch. But he's playing with broken ribs. This is his second straight game playing with broken ribs, so he definitely gets a pass because that man puts in the work. And normally I'd be criticizing the defense. I mean, obviously the defense gave up 35 points. They gave up 348 yards in the air, 2 receiving touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns. They gave up 108 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. But there's a couple of things, right? Now, I still think Gunther needs to get fired. I still think he makes bad decisions. Like, how do you leave guys like Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill completely uncovered in the goal, right? I mean, that's just ridiculous. But we're talking about a defense where 8 of their starters were not allowed to practice throughout the week. 2 of their starters were inactive due to testing positive for COVID-19. And this is arguably the best offense in football in the Kansas City Chiefs. Defending Super Bowl champions, they've got 1 loss. 1 loss. And the referees weren't really helping the team out either. I mean, there was that really bad, what was it, to start off the second half, 3rd and 1. Pat Mahomes threw, was it Robinson? Threw to Robinson, who on the replay looked very obvious. He did not secure the catch, but they ruled it a catch, which I call bullshit because the sign judge waved his hands incomplete. And then they get together, and then you hear, oh, the ruling on the field is a complete pass for a first down, so Gruden challenges it because you could see in the replay, catch wasn't secure. And they didn't overturn it. And there were some other bad calls. There were some very questionable pass interference calls on the Raiders defense that on replay did not look. Some didn't look worthy of a call. Some definitely were not pass interference. So you had, typical situation where the Raiders had to play their opponent and the referees at the same time. But what I'm getting at is, yeah, I still say fire Gunther. I still think he's terrible at his job. I still think there's some pretty impressive talent on this defense that, with proper coaching, could look pretty good. The previous 3 games showcased that. The previous 3 weeks, they allowed 4 touchdowns in 3 weeks. Yesterday they allowed 5. But again, I'm not saying excuses, but it's kind of hard to criticize a defense that wasn't able to practice together throughout the week. I mean, there's only so much you can do through a Zoom meeting, and they're missing 2 starters. And I know people like to hate on Cleveland Ferrell, but this is the first time we've seen this defense without him, and there was a pretty big difference maker. And LaMarcus Joyner, I know he was not a fan favorite last year, but he's been pretty damn good this year. And I think his impact was missed. I mean, I know last week Nevin Lawson had a pretty big game. He was part of Pro Football Focus's 90 Club, which is a pretty big deal. Granted, it was 1 game, and throughout the rest of his career, he had not been that good. If you're a Madden player, you might be thinking, well, no, Nevin Lawson's pretty good because he always gets good cards in Madden. Yeah, I've never understood that. Madden's rating adjusters are terrible. It's very clear to me they don't watch football, and what they do watch, they really don't understand. I've never understood why they've given so much love to Nevin Lawson, of all people, and not guys like Trayvon Mullen and others I can name. Like they hate Gabe Jackson. I can't remember the last time Gabe Jackson was rated more above 79. It's absurd. But getting sidetracked here. That's not the point. Point is, he's just not a suitable replacement for LaMarcus Joyner. So you had these factors, and now granted, I'm not saying that I think under the best of circumstances, under normal circumstances, that the Raiders defense wouldn't have given up 35 points, 350 yards in the air, 100 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. I'm just saying, all things considered, they looked better than I had expected them to. And going back to my original point, I'm not saying I'm okay with the loss, because I'm not. I always hate to see my team lose. I've done it plenty of times. I'm an expert at watching the Raiders lose. And it never gets any easier. But what I'm saying is, they're 6-4, which I know last year after 10 games they were 6-4 as well, and then we had that really bad skid. And I'm not saying that's not possible now, because I get it. Our remaining schedule is the easiest in the AFC and yada, yada, yada. But any given Sunday, guys, we got the Falcons next week. And, yeah, the Falcons are not a good team, but that doesn't mean they can't win. There is no gimme guaranteed wins. Any given Sunday, anyone can win. The terrible Broncos just beat the Dolphins yesterday. The Dolphins are a much better team than that, but any given Sunday. The Colts are way better than people claimed they were at the beginning of the year, which is no surprise to me. I mean, I've been rocking their defense in my fantasy team all season long, but Phillip Rivers is starting to look really, I wouldn't say comfortable, but he's a lot better now in that offense than he was at the beginning of the season. And you still got to play the Chargers. And I hate the Chargers, but let's give credit's due. Chargers are one of those teams that are better than their record states. I mean, all their losses were in one score outcomes. They almost won last time. And, I mean, so the Chargers right now remind me of the 2014 Oakland Raiders, where they kept losing, but they were competitive as hell in the process. And teams like that, I wouldn't say scare me, but, I mean, it's just like law of averages. If you keep showing up and competing over and over and over again, law of averages is eventually going to work out in your favor, right? I mean, I still don't think Anthony Lynn has a job at the end of the season. And he probably shouldn't. Now, if they kept him, I wouldn't complain. Obviously. I don't want the Chargers to get any better. See, I don't have to worry about that with the Broncos, because John Elway is a terrible general manager. He's just going to continue to make the worst possible decisions for this team. And they're just going to continue to not do anything about it because he's John Elway. So shout out to John Elway for being such a incompetent general manager. Yeah, so I'm not saying I'm okay with this loss. I hate the Chiefs, and it always sucks to lose to them, especially at home. But what I'm saying is, this is the best Raiders team I've seen. I'm going to say this. Since the 2002 Oakland Raiders. I'm not saying they're better than them. I mean, Rich Gannon, Tim Brown, Jerry Rice, Tyron Woodley, Charlie Garner. Obviously, I'm not saying they're better than the 2002 Oakland Raiders. I'm just saying this is the best Raiders team I've seen since I graduated high school, because that's how long ago that was. And yes, I understand that after 10 games, the Raiders were 8-2 in 2016. But I think this team right now, the 2020 Las Vegas Raiders, are a better team than the 2016 Oakland Raiders. I think they're a better team than they were last year, even though the records are the same at this point. I'm not expecting a complete disassembly of their talent. Right? I'm not expecting a complete meltdown. That's what I was looking for, meltdown. Sorry, guys, I just woke up. Coffee hasn't kicked in yet. I mean, it could happen. Nothing's guaranteed. But I can easily see this team finishing out 12-4. And I'm predicting that worst case scenario, 10-6 at this point. And when the playoff spot hasn't been secured yet, but I think it's reasonable to expect such a thing. Now, even though there's an added wild card spot, there's going to be 7 teams, and according to that new COVID protocol, potentially 8 teams. Don't ask me about that. I didn't look up see how it works. I just read. I was like, I'll if this actually comes into play, I'll start doing some research on it. But at the moment, 7 playoff teams. And I haven't looked at the updated seeding, but I think they're still in that wild. They were, before yesterday's game, they were the 5th seed overall. I know Cleveland won, which should put them above the Raiders. But in the Baltimore ones, that might have knocked the Raiders down to the 7th overall seed. But they might have been knocked out with this. But, I mean, there's still 6 games left. But I think it's reasonable to expect a playoff appearance. But the AFC's tough right now. Ain't like the NFC. Or goddamn, seriously. I'm actually really glad the Raiders aren't in the NFC right now, because one of those NFC East teams is going to make it into the playoffs with a losing record. And there's going to be a team in the NFC with a winning record that's not going to make it to the playoffs. Because I don't remember if I've said this before. I say it a lot, so I forget where I say it and who I say it to. I'm very much against. I hate the NFL's playoff structure. I hate their format. Personally, I'm a big fan of NBA's playoff format. It's just the top 8 seeds in each conference plays in a tournament. Doesn't matter about did you win your division or not. It's all about record. And we're talking about in football, right? I mean, injuries happen in basketball too, but in football, dudes are getting hit or hitting other dudes like 60-something times a game. And that's not counting in practice, right? Like the punishment they put their bodies through is just insane. I mean, yeah, that goes for most sports. But in football, it just seems so much worse, right? Like the blood and the sweat and the tears just seem so much more intense in football. And there are teams that, through no fault of their own, do not make it to the playoffs because there's a terrible division and someone won that division and got a spot over them. Was it the 2015 Jets that didn't make it to the playoffs even though they won 10 games? While the Houston Texans won 7 and earned a playoff spot? That's absolutely terrible. But what I'm getting in, I keep getting sidetracked. Like I said, guys, I haven't had the caffeine hasn't quite kicked in yet, so I'm still a little groggy. But how should you walk into work today? Assuming you are walking into work. But if not, walking into your kitchen or your home office or your living room or whatever your workspace is, and if you're like me and you don't have a job, just walking out into the rest of the house, approaching your family, you should do it with your head held high. Yeah, they lost. They just barely lost. Until that final drive, actually. That final Kansas City drive. Not only were the Raiders in this, they looked like the better team. On offense, anyway. Fuck the Chiefs. All day, every day. That never changes. But moral victories do exist. The Raiders have played 8 quarters against the defending Super Bowl champions. They came out 1-1. And they lost by 4 points. Derek Carr was 23 of 31 for 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception, which is his, 4th interception on the year? 4 interceptions in 10 games. That's pretty damn good. Josh Jacobs, 17 carries for 55 yards and a touchdown. Henry Ruggs, 1 carry for 12 yards. That was a pretty sweet play. I like jet sweeps. Nelson Aguilar, 6 catches for 88 yards and a touchdown. Darren Waller, 7 catches for 88 yards and a touchdown. Derek Carr continues to distribute the ball generously. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 receivers in this game, which is pretty much par for the course. In almost every game this season, Derek Carr has distributed the ball from anywhere between 9 and 11 different receivers in damn near every game this year. Raiders defense even got an interception. Trayvon Mullen. And it was an important one, too. It killed a drive, late in the second quarter, that would have given the Chiefs a lead going into the second half, where they received to open up the quarter. So yeah, it sucks they lost. And there's a lot of things they could have done better. But they put a lot of good out on there's a lot of good tape out there right now. I'm proud of this team, all things considered. And I'm excited for their potential. And I've talked a lot of shit about Gruden. Maybe not here, but elsewhere, publicly, on the internet. Hell, actually, before the season started, I was ready to see him get his walking papers. And I still have my criticisms. I hate how he wastes timeouts. This game was a great example of why I hate that. God, you need to keep your timeouts for that final drive. You know, if it's a close game. Imagine how this game would have turned out if the Raiders had 3 timeouts going into the 2-minute warning. I'm not saying they would have won, but they would have had more chances. They definitely would have had more than just 28 seconds and a single timeout. And maybe Derek Carr doesn't force that throw to Nelson Aguilar, I think, was the intended receiver before the interception. And again, that's not on Derek Carr. You got 28 seconds and a single timeout. You have to make that throw. That's the play, right? And I don't remember what the specific play was, but I just remember thinking at the time I would have gone, 4 verticals, which is very basic, and I'm sure they were expecting it, but I would have gone 4 verticals, let Carr just try to find the open man and see what happens. But Gruden is just too cavalier with these timeouts, and it's always going to get on my nerves. But what I'm saying is, I was ready to call it for Gruden. I was done. Don't like a lot of the decisions he made. And I'm eating crow over here. Because this is starting to look more and more like the Gruden Raiders of my youth. I was a freshman in high school in 1998, that very first season. They still got a long way to go, but they're a lot further off than a lot of us gave them credit for. So be proud of this team, Raider Nation. They can do big things. And the season's not over yet. Still got 6 more games. And they can win all 6 of those games. I know the Colts are going to be a tough one, but they can do it. This team can finish 12-4. And just imagine that. Remember how you all felt in 2016 when they won 12 games and made it to the playoffs. Yeah, it was a disappointing wild card game against the Texans, but did anyone really think Connor Cook was going to lead them to victory in that game? Moral victories exist. Hold your head high. Fuck the Chiefs. Go Raider Nation. Thank you for listening.